Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Joe, and welcome back to another episode of the Inside Our Phillies podcast. So the Phillies are coming off of a 2-0 loss today here on Saturday night. But the big news is that Zack Wheeler has some blood clots near his right shoulder, and he has been placed on the 15-day injured list as a result. Now, before we get into this episode, since I know that we're going to be talking a lot about how Zack Wheeler's absence is going to impact the baseball team, I just want to make sure that it's very clear that the most important thing is Zack Wheeler's health and his life. Blood clots are obviously a very serious issue, and it can be a little bit difficult to talk about because of that. And I want everybody to know that's listening to this that is what my number one concern is, and it's what a lot of people should be concerned about because blood clots are serious, and we should all be very grateful that the Phillies medical staff were able to find out that he had blood clots. But with that being said, as far as baseball is concerned, which we're going to talk about for the rest of this podcast, it's really, really, really concerning that Zack Wheeler has blood clots in his throwing shoulder. There's really only two examples that I could find of pitchers that had blood clots. It's really not an injury that you see very often in sports. Chris Bosh with the Miami Heat kind of ended up devastating his career to have blood clots. But two pitcher examples that I could find. Number one is Merrill Kelly. 2023 Merrill Kelly, we all know from the Arizona Diamondbacks. He had some blood clots in his calf, in his leg. And he was out for about a month, which, not too bad. If Wheeler missed a month right now, he'd be back mid-September and probably would be good to go, back at 100% in time for the playoffs. However, what's the more concerning and probably more realistic example is Scott Oberg, who was a pitcher for the Colorado Rockies, who had blood clot in his throwing elbow in 2019, and that ended his career. He never pitched again after the blood clots, and unfortunately, however much we don't want to admit it, that's a real possibility. You're seeing lots of people online now, like the online doctors that say something after, a player gets hurt, and for fantasy purposes, like how could this impact things? It seems like the consensus is that Zack Wheeler is unlikely to return this season. Obviously, that could change as time goes on, and we hope that it does change. But if he goes on blood thinners, all of a sudden he can't pitch because if you get hit with blood thinners in the head, then that turns into a really, really bad crisis, and that's not safe. And you have to put his personal health and his life above the team, obviously. But from an on-field perspective, this is really, really quite bad. And all of a sudden, the pitching depth that was one of the Phillies' strengths all season, that depth's not really there anymore. I mentioned a little bit in all of our trade deadline talk that the Phillies should at least be open to the idea of trading for a starting pitcher to help their bullpen out and slide some people into the bullpen because there were a lot of pitchers that were available from the starting side. And now all of a sudden, who is going to be starting games for the Phillies, right? Right now, if you were to start a postseason series, your number one would be Christopher Sanchez. And I think you'd feel pretty good about that. Sanchez is an ace. He might have been the number two on this team for a long time, but I think that I would feel fully confident him pitching game one of a postseason series. Game two, at this point, you're probably looking at Aaron Nola. Obviously, we have no idea what he's going to look like on his return, which all of a sudden there's a massive amount of pressure on because he has to, go back to the way he was a couple of years ago. We really can't have a return of what he looked like so far this year. But Aaron Nola, just because of, I guess, the longevity and how much he's provided for the team for a long time, is your number two starter right now. Number three is a little bit tougher. I can see an argument for Ranger Suarez because of how good he has been in the past, the first half of this year, the first half of last year. But it is such a trend at this point that Ranger Suarez just kind of falls off of a cliff in the second half of the season. And I'd be lying to you if I said that I trusted Ranger Suarez. I just don't. I can't find that in me. Another potential candidate for number three is Jesus Luzardo. About a month and a half ago, we were talking about he's going to move to the bullpen and he's going to be great in the bullpen. But he's really, really struggled. I know that, a couple of his last three starts have been good. His start against Washington, okay, but we'll get into that a little bit later on tomorrow's episode. But he is potentially your number three starter. If he can go back to his form that he was in the beginning of the year, that's great. But he still doesn't look fully normal, fully like Jesus Luzardo. He struggles still with runners on base. He seems to have a tough time in the stretch. There was all the talk about tipping pitches, which is not something that you want to see. So, I think I'd be lying to you if I said I felt that confident about Jesus Luzardo in a playoff start right now. So then you go to Andrew Painter. Andrew Painter, somebody that we thought was going to be up by now and be a big contributor for the Phillies, but he hasn't earned the right to be called up to the major leagues. Andrew Painter's ERA in AAA is about 5 right now, and it's going to be going up as he allowed 3 runs in his first inning of work tonight. His whip is kind of sky high for AAA, and it's not like Lehigh Valley is a hitter's park like it is in Reading. And Andrew Painter, he's not ready. Like, I feel like if you call him up to the majors right now, you're probably gonna get an ERA above 8. Your whip is probably gonna be approaching 2. That's just not tenable. You can't have a guy like that pitching serious innings for your team. You just can't. So then you go to Taijuan Walker, who he doesn't strike a lot of guys out. His splitter doesn't really split all that much anymore. But he's probably one of the best 4 starters that the Phillies have right now. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, Taijuan Walker is going to have an important role on this team. And that's scary. I don't like to have Taijuan Walker be an important player on this team. But I like him a lot personally. He seems like a really good dude. And he has to be ready to take down some big leverage innings. Other than that, like, what do you do? With Mick Abel being gone, you kind of don't have that depth that you had before. If you have one more injury, or if Nola, were to be injured longer, he's coming back tomorrow. But if you were to be injured for longer, all of a sudden you're relying on Andrew Painter, which is a very, very scary place to be. And I think that, regardless of how optimistic you are about this team, the news today should definitely be a little bit of a damper, or quite a lot of a damper. It's really, really hard to imagine a path to see the Phillies winning the World Series without Zack Wheeler, just because of that pitching depth. It's possible. It's absolutely possible. Crazier things have happened. Christopher Sanchez is still really good. Maybe we get 2018 Nola back, and what a joy that would be to see, and see Nola, take his step and really enshrine himself into Phillies lore. I love Aaron Nola, but the pressure on him is so high now. The pressure on Taijuan Walker is high. Pressure on all of these pitchers is just going up massively. And one other thing that I really haven't heard people discuss yet is that all of a sudden, you can't really Phantom IL these guys. Wheeler needed a break, and he's going to get a long break. This very well could be the end of his career if this is something like TOS or outlet syndrome. This could be career ending. We might never see Zack Wheeler pitch in the major leagues again. But all of a sudden, Luzardo's not getting a break. You need him to pitch every 5th day. Ranger's not getting a break. You need him to pitch every 5th day. If you want to give somebody a break, you either have to go bullpen games, which I guess you could do. The Phillies bullpen's okay, and thankfully Duran's okay after getting hit in the ankle last night. So you could go to that, or you could call up Andrew Painter, which feels like a recipe for disaster. But it really has the Phillies in quite an interesting position, because the strength of this team was the starting pitching. That was what made this team tick. That was what was their X factor and made them better than other teams that they were competing against. Better than the Mets that they were competing against for the division. Better than the Padres in the National League, and the Dodgers and the Cubs and all of these teams. But all of a sudden, I can't say that's a strength anymore. What is the best part of this Phillies team right now without Zack Wheeler? Is it still the starting pitching? Maybe. It's not the offense, right? I mean, this outfield is just a complete disaster, and we're going to get more into that tomorrow. But this offense I don't trust, even with Alec Boehm coming back as well tomorrow. Is it the bullpen? This bullpen is better. Robertson is, dicey, but he's able to get outs. Duran's okay. He's healthy, so I'm thankful for that. Alvarado is days away from being back in the fold, at least for the rest of the regular season. I'm having a hard time seeing what the strength is that the Phillies have. Because there's good teams that they're going to be going up against in the postseason. There's good teams that they're going to be going against in the rest of this regular season. We're heading for a homestand where the first team that they're going to be playing is the Seattle Mariners, who, are a good team. Right now, if you look at Baseball Reference, I believe they have the best odds to make the World Series in the American League somehow. You got series against the Dodgers left to go in LA. And really where I'm at is, where does this team go without Zack Wheeler? I don't blame Dave Dombrowski for not having more depth than he had, because any baseball team that loses their best player, and Zack Wheeler was this team's best player, it's going to hurt them a lot. You can't avoid everything, no matter how you build a team. And there's a lot of ways that you can criticize Dave Dombrowski. I criticize him for his approach at the trade deadline, his approach last offseason, and the trade deadline before that. The way I view it, this outfield situation that the Phillies have, which is a disaster, that doesn't happen unless you fucked up somewhere along the way. And Dave Dombrowski fucked up in assembling this outfield. But I can't be mad about what's going on right now with Zack Wheeler and with this pitching staff. This was a really good pitching staff. This still is a good pitching staff. But where do you go? Where do you go? I don't know. I'd love to hear what everybody else has to say. Obviously, with being this late in the year, mid-August, the trade deadline's come and gone, which is a shame. I mean, how great would Dylan Cease be? Because the Padres were looking to trade Dylan Cease, and as a rental, he probably wouldn't cost that much, and that would have been beautiful, just to have somebody to throw innings and have that upside. I would have loved to have Dylan Cease on this team right now. If it was earlier in the season, maybe there's a free agent available, like you had Dallas Keuchel available very late into the year a couple years ago, and that's not there. David Robertson was like an anomaly to still be available at the end of July. So this starting pitching staff, all of a sudden, what do you do? I know I keep saying that, but what do you do? Anyways, I think that this is where I'm going to leave things off for today. I hope that we find out a lot more to come. And if this is the end of Zack Wheeler's career, which it very well could be, how about we win him a World Series to give him a ride into the sunset? Like I said, I'm really grateful for the sake of his health and his life that they did find the blood clots. We on this podcast many times have talked about our worry about Zack Wheeler, even though the team didn't seem worried about his shoulder. Shoulders are always fickle, and I don't think anybody expected this to be a blood clot. But it's not a surprise at the end of the day that the shoulder was worse than what was letting on. It's just very interesting to me how we started yesterday and this is all coming today. Very interesting. But with that being said, let's split tomorrow. Let's win against the Nationals and get a split. Ah, man, this is bad. This is bad. But we'll get into that more tomorrow. We'll get into the series more tomorrow, and you bet that there's going to be a lot more talk about Zack Wheeler tomorrow as well. So I hope to see you all then, and hope you all have a great rest of your night. And yeah, that's all for me.